Our next speaker is Casey Quinlan. He's going to be speaking on the Frontier Justice, JFK, a targeted killed, the network of men, institutions who are employed by the CIA's Executive Action Program and eliminated a national security threat. A little background on Casey. He's an academic professor. He hails from Kansas City and is a nationally recognized researcher and author of The Murder of President John F. Kennedy. Casey was a combat medical corpsman and a Vietnam veteran. He's a Bachelor of Science degree in Social Studies and a Master's degree in American History from Emporia State University in Kansas. Casey is the co-author of the best-selling book Beyond the Fence Line, the eyewitness account of Ed Hoffman and the murder of President Kennedy. If you would, give a warm welcome to Casey Quinlan.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right.
You get one.
Oh, you're good. I'm like, yeah, thank you.
I'll do that.
All right, guys, welcome. And I want to let you guys know I am very excited to be here for several reasons. Number one, I am a very good speaker. The number one thing that I really want to be here is for Judith in this conference. And I look out there, and there's a lot of old people out there.
A lot of young people, too.
Oh, that's right there, yeah. But seriously, guys, I say that not in jest, but I say it because how many of you guys were here at the time, back in 1963, when John F. Kennedy was murdered? Okay. And I am assuming probably about the other 75% weren't. And so we have a job to do, and that job, I think, is what John F. Kennedy said, is that we're going to pass the torch. We need to pass the torch, because I'll be 70 next month. And I've been doing this for 56 years. I'm a teacher, and I feel there's no better profession than to be a teacher and work on the JFK assassination and try to inform young people about what they don't know about. Because if you read all of these books, I'm up to about 1,400 right now. And there's very good books out there, and then there's some that aren't. But even if you don't know if they're good or not, you have to read them anyway. And you got to read. That's what I tell my students. So read as much as you possibly can, and buy these books. And I know, they're bucks, but to give you kind of an idea, my presentation and the next 2 or 3 presentations, I'm a member of what is known as Project JFK CSI Dallas. We're out of Kansas City. And anybody been to Kansas City? Okay. Kansas City, real quickly, is known as Westport. It's the furthest port west of the Mississippi River back in the day, 1860. Okay. And usually when I talk to my college students, I sit back and I want to know what they know about Kansas City. And I said, well, if you go downtown Kansas City, you'll see this brass Indian who's on a brass horse. He's got his hand up like this, and he's in Missouri. And he's looking out over Missouri into Kansas. And I tell my students, I said, do you know what tribe this guy's from? And they go, Osage, Creek, Cherokee. I said, no, he's from the Fakawi Indians. And they all look at me, and I said, you've never heard of the Fakawi Indians? I said, the problem with the Fakawi Indians, I said, what this guy is doing, he just got back from a hunting party, and he's looking for the lost Fakawi Indians. So he's looking into Kansas, and he's going, where the fuck are we? So I would ask you guys today, where the fuck are we today after 56 years? Do we know more about the murder of John F. Kennedy after 56 years? We do. We know a heck of a lot more. And I'm going to turn over the torch to the younger generation. And I've been told that I have to, because my wife said after 50 years, she goes, what are you going to do? I said, they're just opening the files up. What are you talking about? I've got another 50 years. She goes, you wish. So, I want to let you guys know that that's what I do. I'm a teacher, and I'm right on the front lines with those kids, and they've got to know the Constitution. Hell, I don't even think they teach that anymore in school. Well, they don't teach it at the White House anyway. And maybe not even in Congress. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Okay? Well, 56 years ago, we murdered a president. Today, we're impeaching one. So, times change, but sometimes they don't. The story I'm about to tell you is a story. So pay attention to it, and it'll cross some lines here. I've had students for years ask me, can you give me your opinion on the murder of JFK? And I said, no, that's my opinion. And they go, well, what about at the end? Can you give us something? I'll give you a hint. Okay? But I said, you've got to read, you've got to comprehend, you've got to ask the questions, you've got to get out there, and I'll try to answer them. But if I don't, I'm not going to lie to you. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to direct you where you might be able to find it. And usually it's in the National Archives. Project JFK, in conjunction with the 7th Annual JFK Assassination Conference in Dallas, presents Frontier Justice, JFK, A Targeted Kill, the network of men and institutions who employed the CIA's Executive Action Program and eliminated a national security threat. With evidence of historical significance from the Scorzeni Papers. The program you are about to see is based on truth. It is infused with a degree of accurate historical supposition in order to help fill in the 56 years of redactions, whiteouts, and blanks. It is the product of 5.5 decades of quality research. When the debate was raging in the media, Oliver Stone would always argue that the problem with the JFK murder is that no one wants to argue the evidence, which was true since very few journalists or historians had looked at it. The Dinkin and Christensen covert communication intercepts, September, October, November 1963. Anybody hear of these people? Some of you have. They're whistleblowers. Okay? Private First Class Eugene Dinkin, United States Army. Sergeant David Christensen, United States Air Force. Regular Army Private First Class Eugene Dinkin was serving in Metz, France in the 59th Ordnance Group. He held a secret security clearance for his job in the crypto section of his unit. His duties in Metz included deciphering cable traffic from European commands from Washington, D.C. and NATO. In the Army newspaper Stars and Stripes and other print publications that was negative toward the president and the military policies and implied that JFK was a weak president in dealing with the Russians. The examples that he found became more negative, the suggestion being that if Kennedy were removed as president, it would be a good thing. Top secret. Dinkin intercepted and decoded 2 messages. One, there would be an assassination attempt on the life of President Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. And if some of you are following along with that, he basically said it was November 28th and then changed it later on to November 22nd. But I'm going to tell you, if he was that close, by God, he knew something was going on. And so did the United States military. The second one, these 3 people would be somehow involved. A French Corsican assassin by the name of Jean Suetre, Guy Bannister, and William Harvey. Top secret. A second soldier, David Christensen, peeks through Trump's document dump and is entirely independent of Eugene Dinkin. There are 2 CIA documents on him which were released in April of 2018. Christensen was an Air Force sergeant who was stationed at Kirk Newton, Scotland. He held a secret security clearance for his job in the crypto section of his unit. His duties included deciphering cable traffic from Washington, D.C. and NATO. He intercepted a communication just before November of 1963. His translation indicated that an assassination attempt would be made on President Kennedy. Top secret. Why have we not heard about these American soldiers? One reason is this. The Warren Commission hid their names and the information they had gathered in an attempt to warn the president about a prior plot to November 22nd, 1963. 15 years later, Dinkin tried to get his information to the House Senate Select Committee on Assassinations to help solve the crime, and they hid his name again. It took 54 years to lift the veil of secrecy. Sergeant Christensen heard something he shouldn't have heard, and he heard it in a top-secret CIA listening post. As you can probably guess, Sergeant Christensen, like Eugene Dinkin, was summarily committed to a mental institution. The United States military picked up Eugene Dinkin and shipped him off to Geneva, Switzerland, and Walter Reed Army Hospital, the military psychiatric facilities for the criminally insane. Top secret. 2 code operators in secret, American military installations, CIA listening posts, quite independent of each other, and both obviously with clearances, discovered chatter, decidedly secret chatter, about the coming assassination of the President of the United States. If taken seriously, it meant a deep conspiracy involving high-level U.S. government and military plotters, and was active. They were active and operational. It did not include little Lee Harvey, who was sorting textbooks in the Texas School Book Depository building for $1.25 an hour. Top secret. Thursday night, November 21st, 1963, exactly 56 years ago today. The home of Clint Murkison, Dallas, Texas, 11:55 p.m. Lyndon Johnson said this to Madeline Brown. After tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise. I knew Madeline for probably about 30 years. Unique lady, a walking history of Dallas. Madeline Brown claims that Lyndon Johnson made a phone call to her about a minute before President Kennedy made his last speech outside the Texas Hotel in Fort Worth. Madeline, that son of a bitch, crazy Yarborough, and that goddamn effing Irish bastard Kennedy will never embarrass me again. I got about a minute to get to the parking lot to hear that bastard. On Monday, November 25th, 1963, President Truman and President Eisenhower rode together to Arlington National Cemetery and discussed the death of JFK. Oh, thank you, sir. And if you know any history behind Truman and Eisenhower, they didn't like each other, but they're riding in a car to Arlington National Cemetery. The question of CIA intrusion in JFK's murder came up. Because of this question, former President Harry Truman, who signed the National Security Act on July 26, 1947, which created the CIA, wrote in the Washington Post 30 days after President Kennedy's assassination. For some time, I have been disturbed by the way the CIA has been diverted from its original assignment. It has become an operational and at times a policy-making arm of the government. This has led to trouble and may have compounded our difficulties in several explosive areas. We have grown up as a nation, respected for our free institutions and for our ability to maintain a free and open society. There is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that has cast a shadow over our historic position, and I feel that we need to correct it. President Truman saw the CIA's attempted mousetrapping of President Kennedy as a particular outrage. His general complaint was that the CIA had become a peacetime cloak and dagger establishment and at times a policy-making arm of the United States government. The CIA was shaping policy through its control of intelligence and its covert operations, including assassinations. Allen Dulles, who got himself appointed to the Warren Commission and took the lead in shaping the investigation into JFK's assassination, documents in the Truman Library indicate that Dulles installed a small domestic covert action to neutralize any future airing of President Truman's article on covert action. This was important to Dulles, and he invented a pretext to get himself invited to visit Truman in Independence, Missouri. On the afternoon of April 17, 1964, in the middle of the Warren Commission documentation and hearings, Dulles spent a half-hour one-on-one with the former president, trying to get him to retract what he had written in his op-ed. "Hell no," said Harry. "Not a problem," Dulles decided. 4 days later, in a memorandum to Lawrence Houston, CIA General Counsel, Dulles fabricated a private retraction for Truman. claiming that Truman told him that the Washington Post article was all wrong and that he seemed quite astonished at it. Dulles placed President Truman's fabricated retraction in the CIA central files. Dulles was facing a lot of heat from a number of men and institutions who were suggesting the CIA might have been involved in the Kennedy assassination and covered it up. President Kennedy came to the presidency as a Cold Warrior. By 1963, he was actively upsetting the apple cart. He was formulating policy to withdraw combat troops from Vietnam. He was considering a complete ban on nuclear testing, and he was exploring diplomacy with Cuba while building the Alliance for Progress. He was attempting to control the Central Intelligence Agency. He fired the director, Allen Dulles, and two of his top aides, Richard Bissell and Charles Cabell. He upgraded National Security Action Memorandum number 55 and 57, which limited the war power of the Joint Chiefs and the CIA. He pushed to close 75 military bases and passed to cut military spending, or at least pressed to do it. Kennedy's policy initiatives directly concerning the conduct and future of the Cold War rocked the boat with powerful forces and individuals within his own administration. He knowingly and courageously became an agent of change throughout 1963. After his death, President Johnson rapidly reversed or modified all of these policies. President John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963 was not the random act of a lone malcontent devoid of meaning or political consequences. Rather, it was a domestic coup d'etat carried out by the elements of the national security state in reaction to JFK's foreign and military policy and covered up by the elements of the federal government. You want to go there with me? Let's go. Because right now, we need to know what democracy is in this country. And if you want to get down to what the hell's going on in Washington, D.C., you better correct this right now. And you better correct what happened at Iran-Contra, Watergate. Everything that has been going on is tied to this crap. President Kennedy was surrounded by enemies. As Americans, we didn't see the divisions between JFK and his Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was at war with his generals, the CIA, and the entire national security state. President Kennedy encountered major differences of opinion with his Joint Chiefs of Staff over how to solve these military issues: the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Crisis, NATO, and interventions in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA were the products of total war. Using nuclear weapons on the world stage were military solutions. JFK, one generation removed from his military leadership, was acutely aware of the mindset at the Pentagon and the CIA. Military solutions during World War II had been paramount because diplomacy had failed. Tactical nuclear weapons becomes an institutional carryover from World War II and promoted by the United States military during the Cold War to protect national security. Allen Dulles collected the fragments of World War II intelligence agencies along with the men who controlled them. He incorporated the tactics of targeted killings and assassinations known as executive action. He crafted the doctrine of plausible deniability and created a foundation of secrets. He brought this foundation to the United States and sold it to President Truman, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Pentagon, and to the Congress of the United States. It became known as the National Security Act. This act officially ended World War II and launched America into the Cold War. It established the United States as the supreme power with nuclear weapons and dispensed this power through NATO. From that point on, our military industrial managers made the real decisions of state. President Truman simply ratified their decisions and entrenched their power as he did with the establishment of the Pentagon and the CIA. To protect our security, which was absolute destructive power, we now needed a ruling elite of national security managers with an authority above our elected representatives. Guardians of the Republic. President Truman's decision to base our security on nuclear weapons created the contradiction of a democracy ruled by the dictates of the Pentagon, the CIA, and NATO. If I was just to break right now and ask any of you if you knew what NATO was other than the call letters, NATO, could you give me some sort of definition? Raise your hand if you could. And the reason I ask that is because, you know, people sit back and say, we're not in high school anymore. Well, bullshit. We don't even teach it in high school anymore. That is one of the major problems right there. If you were in my class, we would. In our Cold War history, the unspeakable was the void in our government's covert action doctrine of plausible deniability. It was sanctioned by the June 18, 1948 National Security Council Directive, NSCD 10/2. Under the direction of Allen Dulles and General Lyman Lemnitzer, the CIA and the Pentagon interpreted plausible deniability as a green light to assassinate national leaders, executive action, overthrow governments, and lie to cover up any trace of accountability. Top secret. Executive action is a term used by the Central Intelligence Agency in direct support of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In the early 1950s and 60s, this phrase was in reference to their assassination operations and capabilities. These operations were often conducted by the CIA's Division D, a subsection of the agency's Directorate of Operations. Top secret. Truman's successor, President Eisenhower, also failed to challenge in his presidency what he warned against at its end, the military-industrial complex. He left that critical task of resisting that anti-democratic power in the hands of the next president, John F. Kennedy. When President Kennedy stood up to the Pentagon, the CIA, and the military-industrial complex, he was treated as a traitor. The doctrine of plausible deniability allowed for the assassination of a president seen as a national security threat himself. Robert Bauch, a dedicated and loyal Secret Service agent to John and Robert Kennedy, said, "The CIA and the Pentagon viewed JFK as a traitor and evaded and stalled his orders. They even went as far as to keep Khrushchev's correspondence from him. President Kennedy said the men surrounding him all had a collective death wish for the world." What could possibly justify this? The fight against communism. What happened in November of 1963? According to Doug Horn, chief military analyst of the Assassination Record Review Board, a consensus decision made by the hardliners in the national security establishment cast a veto on President Kennedy's life sometime between late 1962 or early 1963. I don't have those records. Any of you guys got those records? You know, it's one thing that everybody yells and screams at us as researchers, you have to have the truth before you get out and do it. Well, when has the United States ever done that crap? Give me a damn break. But we're held to a higher, maybe this high? I don't know. The proximate cause was undoubtedly his resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis by diplomacy rather than by war. This was patently unacceptable to the majority opinion among those elites within the U.S. government and military who churned out the sausage of foreign and military policy. They were nicknamed the lunatic fringe at that time. 56 years after President Kennedy's assassination, the majority of Americans believe his murder occurred as a result of a conspiracy. All of you who believe that there was a conspiracy in the murder of John F. Kennedy? Raise your hand.
Can't use the word conspiracy anymore.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Thank you guys. Here's the other thing. That is what has happened to our society, and I know I'm going to take a little bit away from David. David is my former student, and he's been 30 years with us on this research. David's right back over there. He came up to me about a week ago, and he says, I'm going to throw this at you. He says, my daughter was kicked out of school for a day. I said, what did she do? Well, they were studying the Constitution. I said, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. God, somebody better give somebody some award out there. They actually studying the Constitution? Well, they actually copied something off, put the papers out, and the first thing she saw was blacked out Second Amendment to the Constitution. And I looked at him, and he says, well, what would you have done? I said, holy crap. I said, so our superintendent at Olathe District Schools has the right to cut out the Second Amendment to the Constitution? I said, who has the right to do that? Nobody. Well, she asked why it was cut out. And she says, before we got an answer to that, she was upset about the whole thing. So she got after school, and then she got out of school for about a day. The reason this school district had weapons and guns in that Second Amendment. We can't talk about stuff like that. Guns and weapons. Good God, people, did we fight a war known as the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and any other wars? What did we use?
Sure wasn't double.
Oh, God, what, lightning bolts? And how many games that we have today are killing the hell out of people with our students? Yeah. Okay? Yeah, you know. Get them out. How many of you are playing games on this crap? But you know what? This crap, you got to embrace it, because if you don't embrace it, it'll run over you. The release of thousands of government documents, transcripts, and tapes confirmed that others had a strong motive to remove him from his elected position. One common challenge to the concept of conspiracy is that either the institutions of law or of government would have ensured that the people with knowledge of a probable conspiracy would bring it before the public and make it a matter of historical record. This program is demonstrating that as of 2018, such knowledge has become a matter of record, fragmented in memos, taped conversations, surveillance reports, biographies, and anecdotal remarks to friends and family, and deathbed confessions, but certainly not recorded in the official histories. John F. Kennedy's assassination is rooted in our denial of our nation's crimes in World War II that began the Cold War and the nuclear arms race. As a growing precedent to JFK's assassination by his own national security state, we, the citizens of the United States, supported our government when we destroyed whole cities, Hamburg, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, when it protected our Cold War security by world-destructive weapons, and when it carried out the covert murders of foreign leaders with plausible deniability, in a way that was obvious to critical observers. A lot of you people here, well, some of you got gray hair and you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on in our country. By avoiding our responsibility for the escalating crimes of state done for our security, we who fail to confront the unspeakable open the doors to JFK's assassination and its cover-up. The unspeakable is right in front of us. Our national security state, the men who operated these institutions during Kennedy's administration, Lyman Lemnitzer, Allen Dulles, John J. McCloy, General Laureus Norstad, Admiral Arleigh Burke, Director Richard Helms, General Curtis LeMay, Director James Angleton, General Edward Lansdale, Director J. Edgar Hoover, Director James Rowley, and Vice President and President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson. Taken from one of the Rolling Stones songs, please allow us to introduce ourselves. We are men of wealth and taste. Guardians of the Republic. Our national security state in 1963, the institutions, the Pentagon, Joint Chiefs of Staff, NATO, Army G2 Intelligence, Office of Naval Intelligence, Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, United States Secret Service. The Pentagon, the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and NATO were tormented over President Kennedy's policy and his peace initiatives in changing the direction of the Cold War. They went to an off-the-shelf, self-sustaining, standalone entity that could perform certain operations within the guidelines of the National Security Act. There are no rogue elements. This was done under a law and rule, and then covered up under the blanket of our national security state. The reason we have trouble trying to figure out who the hell killed JFK, because it's sitting up there somewhere. I've tried to get into the National Archives, I have, but my buddies and some of you guys have been there. But I'm not sure where to look unless you have something written down from a congressman, senator that says you can actually look in this thing. And you can't copy anything down. Guardians of the Republic. They engaged the CIA's Executive Action Program with an assassination capability and eliminated a national security threat, terminating the life of President John F. Kennedy under the direction of Allen Dulles and General Lyman Lemnitzer. The CIA and the Pentagon employed National Security Directive, National Security Council 10/4, and ordered the murder of President Kennedy and executed the use of plausible deniability to lie and cover up any trace of accountability. These three great Americans waited behind the stage of national security and delivered to us truth, justice, and the American way of life in the murder of President Kennedy. President Lyndon Johnson, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and Chief Justice Earl Warren. God bless America. The lunatic fringe. The November 22nd, 1963 execution of John F. Kennedy was the final act. It was a collision of two high-speed locomotives, one hell-bent on war breaking out and the use of nuclear weapons, if possible, and the other hell-bent on ending the Cold War. The lunatic fringe. In the early 1960s, some members of Congress felt it was necessary to label the elite members of the United States military, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as the lunatic fringe because of their strategic views on the candid use of dropping the atomic bomb on anything and everything. These congressional members felt that the U.S. military was not only out of line, but had stepped over the line. When Kennedy wanted to find out what he should do in Cuba, you ready? 1962, all right? He asked Admiral Arleigh Burke, nuke 'em. General Thomas Power, nuke 'em. Loris Norstad, nuke 'em. Curtis LeMay, nuke 'em, nuke 'em, nuke 'em. General Lyman Lemnitzer, nuke 'em. General Edward Lansdale, nuke 'em. Allen Dulles, nuke 'em. Vice President Richard Nixon, nuke 'em. And Kennedy says, and we call ourselves the human race. The lunatic fringe. The clash with Admiral Burke, tensions over nuclear war planning, and the bumbling of the Bay of Pigs convinced Kennedy that a primary task of his presidency was to bring the military under strict control. In this clash with Admiral Burke, coupled with articles in Time and Newsweek that portrayed Kennedy as less aggressive than the Pentagon, angered him. He told his press secretary, Pierre Salinger, "This shit has got to stop." Tennessee Senator Albert Gore Sr. knew that General Lyman Lemnitzer was a secret operational expert in 1943. He had been in charge of the negotiations to cause a rift between Italy and the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler. And in 1944, along with Allen Dulles, Lemnitzer and Dulles, led a secret negotiations with the Nazis in Ascona, Switzerland, to prepare Germany's capitulation, Operation Sunrise, OSS. Senator Gore discovered that General Lemnitzer was also involved in the creation of the Allies' Stay Behind Network, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the MAG program, not Make America Great Again. This one is the Military Assistance and Advisory Group. Remember that, MAG program. By using and recruiting Nazi agents to fight the USSR, which helped war criminals and people accused of crimes against humanity to escape to Latin America. However, Gore was not able to corroborate Lemnitzer's involvement. Recently published secret correspondence of General Lemnitzer show that he, the commander of the American forces in Europe, General Loris Norstad, former NATO commander, and a handful of high-ranking military officers were conspiring to abolish President John F. Kennedy's military policies in the fall of 1963. This is precisely why the term lunatic fringe was being kicked around in Congress and about the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and NATO. The key to understanding the murder of President Kennedy resides in the concealed history of NATO and its implementation and execution of CIA and U.S. military covert assassination packages. The reason for NATO, also called North Atlantic Alliance, intergovernmental military alliance based on the North Atlantic Treaty, which was signed April 4, 1949. NATO would constitute a system of collective defenses whereby its member states agree to mutual defense in response to an attack by any external party, probably Russia. NATO's headquarters is located in Brussels, Belgium, where the Supreme Allied Commander also resides. North Atlantic Treaty Organization, General Lemnitzer, Allen Dulles, and Reinhard Gehlen were instrumental in establishing NATO and Operation Gladio. Armed caches were hidden, escape routes prepared, and loyal members recruited, whether in Italy or in other European countries. It was funded by American, British military intelligence, including MI6, OSS, ONI, and the Gehlen Org. Its clandestine cells were to stay behind in enemy-controlled territory and to act as resistance movements, conducting sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and assassinations. The CIA and MI6 created Operation Gladio. Gladio was European false flag terrorism sponsored by NATO. Operation Gladio was a secret army created by the CIA and MI6 during the 1950s. It employed the use of sabotage, guerrilla warfare, targeted killings, and assassination behind enemy lines. Gladio was administered under the concealment and protection of NATO. It set up shop in Italy and organized schools of covert assassinations and targeted killings in 15 European cities. Its command center was located in Madrid, Spain. These schools trained assassins for indiscriminate, covert, and clandestine murder on a worldwide basis. It officially existed through NATO. These schools were specifically conceived by elite OSS personnel, General Lyman Lemnitzer, Commander Allen Dulles, and were financed by John J. McCloy, Manhattan Bank. And the principal director of these schools was Otto Skorzeny. Assassination and targeted killings were planned and directed by these OSS officers during World War II. At least since World War II, a distinction had been drawn between assassination of civilian leaders and targeted killings of leaders of fighting organizations. Some cases were blurry, such as the British Czech Operation Anthropoid, the killing of uniformed SS officer Reinhard Heydrich, the acting Reichsprotector and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a failed attempt on British troops by the Field Marshal Aaron Rommel, and was clearly aimed at a military leader, which was the successful shooting down of Admiral Isakuro Yamamoto. Should we add General Patton to this list? Another 3-hour presentation. Operation Anthropoid was a targeted kill. British OSS, MI6, Czechoslovakian assassins directed by American intelligence, the OSS. The target, Reinhard Heydrich, poster child for this for Nazism. Hitler's man in charge of Prague, Czechoslovakia. Tactics for this murder: targeted kill. May 27th, 1942, died June 4th, 1942. How? A motorcade, parade route, 2 turns, hairpin turn, slowing the car, stopping it, multiple shooters, multiple shots, and ambush from a grassy knoll. Sound familiar? National security state did their homework. Czechoslovakia, 1942. Dallas, Texas, 1963. The tactics of murder on John F. Kennedy: a motorcade, parade route, 2 turns, hairpin turn, slowing the limo, stopping it, multiple shooters, multiple shots, and ambush from a grassy knoll. Just ask Robert Groden. Fingerprints of American intelligence? It's all over Dallas. These assassination schools were designed, protected, and implemented through the United States Pentagon and concealed within the national security state. OSS General Lemnitzer helped to establish and direct the Military Assistance Advisory Group beginning in 1949. The MAG program is a designation for United States military advisors to be sent to other countries to assist in training of conventional armed forces and facilitate military aid. Numerous MAGs operated around the world, and they were under the control of NATO. The MAG program was the vehicle used by NATO and the Pentagon, General Lyman Lemnitzer, as a covert cover to hide within its infrastructure CIA-designated assassination teams, Allen Dulles, executive action teams. MAG program was used exclusively by Otto and Elsie Skorzeny and their Skorzeny network as a tool to conduct international assassinations. So who is Otto Skorzeny? Hitler's #1 commando. Nazi Special Forces, 1941-45. Some of World War II activities of former SS Commando Otto Skorzeny was uncovered by Major Ralph Gaines from Skorzeny's personal papers in 2012. In 1943, Hitler himself decorated Skorzeny with the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross in recognition of his leadership in Operation Ike, which was the Italian. He was rescued the German for the German commandos, the Italian fascist director Benito Mussolini. The actual Skorzeny papers are personal correspondence and business records of Otto Skorzeny. At the end of World War II, Allied powers conducted war crimes trials at Nuremberg and Dachau. Skorzeny surrendered to the Allied powers May 20th, 1945. He was a prisoner of war, sat on the docket at Nuremberg and Dachau, and awaited for a war crime trial. Elite OSS military officers, General William Donovan, Commander Allen Dulles, Commander Frank Lindsay, vetted Otto Skorzeny. They groomed him as a covert assassination asset for the OSS, the CIA, British MI6, and Army intelligence against the new enemy of the state, Russia and communism. Otto Skorzeny was tried as a war criminal in the military court in Dachau, was found not guilty on August 18, 1947. Skorzeny was sent to Spain along with his new wife Elsie, and the Skorzenys became the military covert assassination assets for CIA, MI6, and U.S. Military. Now, I'm going to skip a couple things real quick here because I know I'm getting toward my time. Frank Lindsay was the OSS CIA officer who investigated and managed Otto and Elsie Skorzeny, covert assassination assets. Let me move on real quick. So remember Frank Lindsay. Evidence reveals that Skorzeny gradually and methodically became involved in U.S. intelligence covert operations during the Cold War. The Skorzeny papers confirmed that his industrial office was located in Madrid, Spain. CIA written correspondence to and through Skorzeny came up with the identification code, or CIA diagraph, QJ. QJ was a diagraph or code for Spain and Skorzeny's private intelligence network. His network was supplying information and clandestine operational support, including assassination operations, to the Central Intelligence Agency, British MI6, and U.S. military intelligence at NATO. The legitimate businesses that Scorzani operated permitted him to act within complete separation of the United States government. His businesses were essentially a cutout. It's interesting to find out, if we can, that the CIA's Executive Action Program and the identity of QJ/Win. A key component in Scorzani's private network was his ability to leverage his business connections for covert operations. Scorzani worked directly with the Vice President of the Oil and McNaughton Petroleum Industry, Colonel Jack Crichton. Colonel Crichton was an OSS officer during World War II stationed in Europe. Colonel Jack Crichton was Empire Banks and Oil Natural Gas Department Director who represented Dallas, Texas. He was Vice President and Director of the Goyler and McNaughton Oil Company, the San Juan Oil Company, and Senior Law Partner in Bradley, Crichton and Law Associates of Dallas, Texas. Crichton was President of NAFCO Oil and Gas. He also owned a company called Dorchester Gas Producing. A fellow director was David Harold Byrd, who along with Clint Murkison, H.L. Hunt, and Sid Richardson was part of the big oil group in Dallas, who had the 27.5% oil depletion allowance. Colonel Jack Crichton was the commanding officer in charge of the 488th Army Intelligence Unit for the Dallas Division of the Texas National Guard on November 22, 1963. Over 60% of the Dallas Police Department personnel were members of the Texas National Guard. Colonel Crichton had total control over Dealey Plaza and the Dallas Police. A military presence in Dallas. In 1956, Colonel Jack Alston Crichton initiated his own spy unit, the 488th Military Intelligence Detachment. Crichton served as the unit's commander under Lieutenant Colonel George Whitmire. In November 1963, Colonel Jack Crichton was involved in arranging the motorcade route for President Kennedy. His close friend, Deputy Police Chief Lumpkin, and fellow military member of 488th Military Intelligence Detachment, drove the pilot car of Kennedy's motorcade. In the car was Lieutenant Colonel George Whitmire, commander of all Army Reserve units in East Texas, where the car stopped briefly in front of the Texas School Book Depository building, where Lumpkin spoke to a policeman who was controlling traffic at Houston and Elm. Scorzani's were protected assets of CIA, military intelligence, OSS, NATO, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Pentagon. Scorzani established his network while amplifying his assassination schools by training, managing, and working directly with these covert operatives. Richard Helms, Richard Reinhard Galen, William Harvey, Jean-René Suetra, Edward Lansdale, and Lucien Conan. During World War II, General C.D. Jackson served with the OSS. He was Deputy Director of the Psychological Warfare Division, SHAPE, under General Eisenhower. Jackson was aware of Scorzani and his connection of covert assassination programs. After World War II, Jackson became Managing Director of Time Life, Fortune Magazine, President of Anti-Communist Free Europe Committee. He was an established speechwriter for Eisenhower, and he was the go-between, the liaison officer between the CIA and the Pentagon. When Abraham Zapruder took his famous film in Dallas on November 22, 1963, C.D. Jackson purchased it on behalf of Time Life, Time Warner now, and also now Spectrum. To protect the integrity of the film upon viewing it on Sunday morning, he ordered it locked in a vault in Time Life building in Manhattan. The American public won't see this film until 1975, when Geraldo Rivera's Goodnight America showed it and was sued by Time Life for $12 million. The editors of Time Life incorporated C.D. Jackson and CIA iTech Corporation President Frank Lindsay told Americans after hiding the Zapruder assassination film for 12 years, the film is intact, no alterations. Both of these OSS CIA agents were totally aware of Otto Scorzani and his covert assassination operation in 1949. Films, frames, and fabrications, splices all over, guys. All right, I'm going to finish this up very quickly, and I'm going to go to who is Q.J. Win. By 1979, J. Gary Shaw was asking the question, who is Q.J. Win? Well, Q.J. Win was an operative, a CIA operative, United States military operative, that was in Dallas, Texas, and Fort Worth. The CIA, QJ Win cryptonym was a cryptonym used by the CIA. It's a diagraph. We know that from William Harvey, who appeared before the committee that basically said this is what the CIA did. Okay. In ending, here's what I'm going to tell you. Otto Skorzeny is QJ Win. He's not only an operative, but he's running a program. And that program is going to be sent to Dallas. Jean-René Suetra was going to run the program in Dallas. Okay? Covert assassination instrument in Dallas on November 22nd. It involves all of the Jim Garrison investigation, which he uncovered a lot of this. Jean-René Suetra was flown out of Dallas by the military after the murder of JFK. Warren Commission members Allen Dulles, John J. McCloy were fully aware of the CIA's and the Pentagon's clandestine involvement and implementation of the assassination capability of Otto and Elsie Skorzeny. Why? They invented it. Okay? Thank you, guys. I'm a little bit over my time. I appreciate it. Thank you.